Some of you might have seen the article in the New York Times in the last couple of days. Stunning article. Stunned me. The report was, of course, on the latest global happiness survey. And the usual characters are often, right, they repeat winners in happiness. But this article called into question kind of the survey itself and the questions being asked, and asked for a much broader conceptualization of happiness. Was it connected to wealth? Was it connected to abundance? And even with the new criteria and the new results with the same old characters and still there, yet again, inexplicably, paradoxically, incomprehensibly, Israel is near the top. I mean, you have to read it. You have to pause and read it over and over again. Israel? Really? When I mention to people that I'm going there, they wish me luck. Even after October 7th, even now when our people are still buried under their grief and their inability to function, still knowing that there are souls still being held captive, still mourning going on in Israel, still, even now, when so many of us feel threadbare emotionally, questioning assumptions, beliefs, identities, how can people who are in so much pain still be happy? And more than that, this week, as we celebrated Yom HaTzmaut, something brilliant that is structured into the very choreography, the temporal choreography of time, that Yom HaZikaron, the day of Israel's Memorial Day, is placed right before Yom HaTzmaut, forcing us to move through Yom HaZikaron into Yom HaTzmaut. Maybe you wondered with me this week, and maybe last year too, but this week, maybe differently, but still, how does joy arise? Is it even possible? Is it inappropriate? Maybe some of you came here tonight holding that, maybe not about Israel, but about something else too in your life. Is it possible? Is it permissible? With everything that's going on, are we allowed to actually laugh and dance even? And I want to honor that. It is hard to hold joy and sorrow in the very same heart. But that's what this moment and our tradition asks of us. We need each other right now. We need to gather. Not because things are resolved, but because things are not resolved. Community is where grief becomes prayer, and prayer becomes courage, and courage becomes celebration. I can feel that contradiction most acutely when I read that article. I had to read it a couple times. I caught reference. I was all over the place. I didn't believe it. But of course, it reminded me that this should not be news to me because I read it before in a book written, literally came out like a month before October 7th by Roman member Dan Sinor and his brother-in-law Saul Singer. The title of the book was The Genius of Israel. And in it, the authors asked, how can a nation with so many challenges rank so high in happiness, meaning, and innovation? And the answer that they give is simple, but it's profound and it's deeply Jewish. It's not about safety. It's about connection. It's about belonging. It's about purpose. And the sense that you are needed and that someone will show up for you. That's what they discovered. In Israel, they write, loneliness is rare. Don't tell that to people who are Israeli, who feel lonely. But there's always a knock on the door, and that's l'tov u'l'ra. The social network, that fabric, is for good and also sometimes smothering. But there's always a neighbor, because they know that happiness is not a mood. Happiness is not a mood. It is part of social fabric. And that began to unlock something for me in my thinking. I turned to the Torah this week, and there we have Tazria Mitzorah. 2 portions in the Torah that most people skip. Skin afflictions, isolation, contamination, bodily fluids. But you all know, if you've been at Ramu for a little while, that I've taught repeatedly each and every year that the illness that is described in the Torah, tzarat, is not a medical condition as much as a spiritual one. It is the spiritual made visible. When I broke my hip 6 weeks ago, I kept thinking to myself, okay, what's the Torah here? What's the Torah here? What is my own soul speaking to me through an event? Or as the great Carl Jung said, what we don't work on the inside, we meet outside as fate. And so I kept thinking to myself, okay, I've got work to do. I'll spare you the details. My therapist gets paid too much for me to use all of you for that. But when we look at tzarat, we look at Tazria Mitzorah, we look at the illness, the skin afflictions that are enumerated in tomorrow morning's Torah reading from the book of Leviticus, there's one thing that stands out. The one who is afflicted with this disease is sent outside of the camp, but the Torah doesn't leave them there outside the camp. The Kohen, the priest, has to come close. The Kohen has to see them and touch them. He has to know their story and what happened. And when the time is right, the Kohen brings them back into the camp. The Torah's radical claim is that healing begins with what I've called in the past sacred witnessing or witnessing, to be with someone, with presence. Someone says to you, I see you there. I see your pain. You're not alone. This is what my colleague, Rabbi Sharon Browse, calls the ethics of proximity. The sacred act of coming close to pain rather than turning away from it, of facing grief with one's eyes wide open and one's heart equally so. What's more, the Torah here is teaching us something profound. There is always this dance of rupture and repair. There's always this dance of exile and return. There's always this lived reality of proximity, closeness, and distance. And all of that. In Israel, the genius of the ethics of proximity come full force. Healing doesn't come from pretending that everything's okay. It comes from linking arms at the edge of the abyss and singing anyway, of dancing even dancing. Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, incredible leader of the Central Synagogue community over on the east side, she offered some stunning Torah this past Wednesday night. I was there at the Tekes Mavar at that transition ceremony between the day of grief, of Yom HaZikaron, that recognizes all of the fallen who have given their lives for the state of Israel, and then moves us into Yom HaTzmaut. And Rabbi Buchdahl stood up, and she began to use Debbie Friedman's music to the very words that we just heard. Hafachta misbedi lemacholi. You have turned my grief, my eulogy, right? You have turned my mourning into sadness. Debbie Friedman set those words from Psalm 30 to beautiful music. And then Rabbi Buchdahl wove in a very unexpected musical mashup. She told the story first of Yuval Raphael, a survivor of the Nova Festival, who just won Israel's Next Star and has earned the right to represent Israel at the Eurovision. And Yuval chose for her song Abba's Dancing Queen. Because as many of the survivors of the Nova Festival did within weeks, literally, days, weeks of that horrific tragedy, they began to say, we will dance again. We will dance again. Afachta mispidi lamacholi. You turn my mourning into dance. You turn my mourning into song. And that's where the song that we began with brings us, Ishai Rivo. For those of you who don't know Ishai Rivo, he's remarkable. He's an observant Israeli singer-songwriter who is beloved across both the religious and secular lines. He's the kind of crossover star in Israel for years. His gentle voice is profoundly moving. And his song, which I've heard on a loop over the last couple of days, is profoundly important for the understanding of the genius of Israel. His voice, which is steeped in Torah and also longing, it carries an ache and a faith. The words are Halev Shali Nikra L'Shnayim. My heart has been torn into two. V'rak ata yachol lafoch mispedi lemacholi. He says, V'rak ata, only you can turn my mourning into celebration and dance. And when I first heard it, I know who the ata is, the second person pronoun, like you, meaning with a capital Y-O-U, God. V'rak ata, only you can turn my mourning into dance. But I think it's much more layered than that. It's a prayer about you, every you. About the one who stands before us and says, I see you. About the one who stands next to us and says, I will hold you. About the one who stands with you in moments and says, I will lift you. The ata, the you, the at, the one who's there. V'rak ata, only you, meaning only us together, only when the social fabric that punctures a hole in our atomized isolation, when that has been dispersed, dispelled, when community is built on those principles. Happiness, not a mood, where we can dance and we can sing, because you can dance and you can sing. You can finish that. That's what the priest did for the Mitzorah. That's what Israelis and Jewish community do for one another. I was interviewing an amazing woman named Abigail Pogrebin. Abby Pogrebin is a friend and also like a well-known person in the Jewish world, and she happens to share many things that I share, but one of the things that we share is that we're both twins. But she's an identical twin, and she wrote a book about twinship and what it means to have someone always there with you, about the unspoken, how she lived with such proximity to her sister that she didn't even know how much it was forming her confidence in the world. She was never alone. V'rak ata, v'rak at, and only you. Tonight in my home, 32 new members of this beautiful community will join. Listening to Sam Harris' podcast last week or a couple weeks ago talking about where you find community these days and how religion can't be replaced, or can it be? I can just say this, there are lots of different kinds of community in the world. The most important thing is community. That we show up for one another, that we're there for one another, that we have the ethic of proximity in our kishkas, in the very DNA of our community. And that is a world that we want to build on. That is the Torah of this community. And the Torah of our society at this moment, which is being torn asunder and being riven with division. The genius of Israel is not only for Israel, but for all of us. To double down on our connections with one another. To double down on what it is to show up for one another. To double down on the ata and the at. So as we sing this song in a moment, and we hear the words, V'rak ata mevin ech legeshet lalev sheli. Only you know how to approach my heart. We think about all those in our lives who really know how, lageshet lalev shelanu. The ones who know the right words, the ones who know exactly the approach needed, the ones that we reach out to and who reach out to us. There's no way that we can possibly hold the grief of this moment and these moments alone. The heart is, wow. But together, as one, we can support one another in this ability to hold both the grief and the joy, the ruin and the repair, the broken and the whole.